February 12, 1945. A muddy field outside Schmidt, Germany. The air tastes of wet iron and pine smoke. Every sound is muffled by the low, bruised sky that has been spitting a mix of sleet and rain for 3 days straight. For Sergeant Frank Miller, 28th Infantry Division, attached to the V8 Corps motor pool, the world has shrunk to the growl of a 2.5-ton GMC truck and the sucking sound his boots make in the churned-up earth. The Battle of the Hurtgen Forest is officially over, but the ghost of it lingers here, in the splintered trees and the exhausted faces of the men who survived it. Frank's job is no longer about hauling ammunition to the front. It's about managing the debris of war. Today, that debris is human. A column of German prisoners, captured during the final clearing operations, is being herded into a temporary enclosure fenced with concertina wire. Most are boys and old men, the dregs of the folkstorm, their uniforms a motley collection of ill-fitting gray wool and civilian coats. They move with a shuffling, defeated gait, eyes fixed on the mud. Frank leans against the hood of his Jeep, the metal cold through his field jacket, a lukewarm canteen cup of coffee in his hands. He's supposed to be supervising the refueling of the guard post generators, but the fuel truck is late, so he watches. It's a grim spectacle he's seen a dozen times, yet he can't look away. You see the enemy, the Krauts, the ones who had been shooting at you and your buddies just weeks ago. But up close, stripped of their rifles and their fight, they just look like cold, hungry men. Then he sees her. She is not with the main group of men. She and a half-dozen other women are being processed separately, their presence an anomaly that draws unwelcome stares from the GIs on duty. They wear the drab gray uniform of the Luftwaffenhelferinnen, female auxiliaries for the German Air Force. This one, however, seems different. While the others huddled together, heads bowed against the wind, she stands a little straighter. Her face is pale and smudged with dirt, her blonde hair escaping in damp strands from beneath a sodden field cap. But it's her eyes that snag his attention. They aren't defeated. They are watchful, scanning the wire, the guards, the gray sky, as if calculating angles, looking for an escape that doesn't exist. A corporal with a clipboard barks an order in broken German, shoving one of the women who is too slow to move. The woman stumbles, and for a flash, the watchful eyes of the blonde one turn to flint, a flicker of defiance. Then it's gone, smoothed over into a mask of weary compliance. Frank feels something tighten in his chest. It's not pity, not exactly. It's a strange sense of recognition. He's seen that look before, on green GIs pinned down for the first time, the moment they realize the world is a machine designed to crush them, and they have to decide whether to break or to hold. He watches as she's led toward a smaller, more isolated tent at the far end of the enclosure. His gaze follows her until she disappears inside. The fuel truck finally rumbles up the track, its engine complaining. Frank pushes himself off the Jeep, the moment broken. He has a job to do. But the image of her face, of those calculating, undefeated eyes, is burned into his mind. Later that evening, while checking the perimeter generators, he finds himself near her section of the camp. He can hear the low murmur of voices from the women's tent. He has an extra can of peaches in his musette bag, saved from his sea rations. On a sudden, inexplicable impulse, he walks toward the wire fence, keeping to the shadows cast by a stack of supply crates. He can't see inside the tent, but he can see the faint outline of figures moving against the canvas. He crouches low, pries the lid off the can with his P38 opener, and rolls it carefully under the wire. It makes a soft thud as it stops in the mud a few feet from the tent flap. He doesn't wait to see if anyone finds it. He just melts back into the darkness, the cold rain starting up again, leaving the small, sweet offering behind in the vast, bitter landscape of the war. The generator for the western perimeter floodlights sputters. It's been doing that for a week. The carburetor needs cleaning, a job no one wants in the freezing mud. But for Sergeant Frank Miller, the faulty engine has become an opportunity. It is located less than 20 yards from the women's POW tent, its rhythmic coughing and clanking providing a screen of noise, a pocket of manufactured privacy in a world where none exists. For 3 days in a row, he has spent the hour after dusk tinkering with it. his back to the main camp, his focus seemingly on stripped bolts and fouled fuel lines. He knows she is watching. The first time he worked on the generator, he felt her gaze from the tent flap. He didn't look back. He just worked, the beam of his flashlight playing over the greasy engine parts. On the second day, she was standing near the wire, ostensibly stretching her legs. He risked a glance. She gave a short, almost imperceptible nod. It was a thank you for the peaches. He nodded back, his hands never pausing in their work. Tonight is different. The air is sharper, the ground hardening with a deep frost. The guards are miserable, huddled around a fire barrel 50 yards away. This is his chance. He keeps his voice low, a gravelly murmur that barely carries over the chugging engine. "You speak English?" he asks, not looking at her, his hands busy with a wrench. There's a long silence. He thinks maybe she didn't hear, or won't answer. He feels a fool's flush of embarrassment. Then, a quiet voice, hesitant, with a thick accent. "A little. From school." He dares a quick look. She's closer to the wire now, her arms wrapped around herself for warmth. Her name, he learned from a sympathetic clerk in the processing tent, is Hannah Vogel. She was a signals operator, 20 years old. "My name's Frank," he says, his eyes back on the engine. "You shouldn't be here. This place," he trails off, unsure of what to say. That it's no place for anyone, least of all her? It feels like a stupid, obvious thing to say. "There is nowhere else," she replies, her voice flat. "France, Belgium, now here. It is all the same." He can feel the utter lack of hope in her words, and it angers him. He's seen the way the other GIs look at the female prisoners. He's heard the crude jokes. He's seen the casual cruelty of men who have had their own humanity stripped away and are eager to do the same to others. The camp is a temporary holding area. Soon, they'll all be transported to larger, more permanent camps in France or even back in the States. But the journey itself is dangerous. The roads are a mess, the convoys are targets for holdouts, and the guards are unpredictable. "They'll move you soon," he says, tightening a bolt that doesn't need tightening. "To the rear, a big camp." "We have heard," she says. "They say it is worse there." He knows she's probably right. The permanent camps will be organized, bureaucratic, and impersonal. She will become a number on a list, lost in a sea of thousands. Here, in the chaos of the front, she is at least a person he can see, a person he can, in some small, useless way, try to help. The idea begins to form then, a wild, reckless seed planting itself in the hardened soil of his mind. It's insane. It's impossible. It's a court-martial offense of the highest order. But the image of her being loaded onto a truck with the others, her face disappearing into a faceless crowd, is something he finds he cannot accept. He puts his tools down and turns to face her directly for the first time, the generator's noise covering them like a blanket. The floodlight behind him puts her face in shadow, but he can still see the glint in her eyes. "Maybe you don't have to go," he says, the words feeling heavy and dangerous in his own mouth. She takes a small, sharp breath. She understands his meaning immediately. The hope he thought was extinguished in her flickers back to life, mingled with sheer terror. "How? That is not possible." "I fix things," Frank says, his voice gaining a confidence he doesn't feel. "I fix trucks. I fix generators. I know the roads. I know the schedules." He looks over his shoulder, a paranoid reflex. The other guards are still at their fire. He turns back to her. "I'm not leaving you here, Hannah. I'm not letting them take you to one of those places." He hasn't thought it through. He has no real plan, just a raw, protective instinct that has taken over his reason. But he has said it now. The promise is real, hanging in the frozen air between them. The idea, once spoken, takes on a life of its own. It moves from a reckless impulse to a concrete, terrifying project. For the next week, Sergeant Frank Miller lives a double life. By day, he is the reliable, no-nonsense motor pool NCO, his hands stained with grease, his voice a familiar bark over the roar of engines. But by night, in the stolen minutes of privacy and the quiet corners of his mind, he is a conspirator, a planner, a man risking everything for a ghost of a chance. His work becomes his cover. Every trip for spare parts is a reconnaissance mission. He memorizes the guard rotation at the secondary checkpoints. He studies the flow of supply trucks and medical transports heading west, away from the front. He pays a pack of cigarettes to a disgruntled private in the quartermaster's depot for a detailed map of the sector, claiming he wants it as a souvenir. He spends hours poring over it under a poncho with a shielded flashlight, tracing routes through the ruined forests and forgotten farm tracks, looking for a path that is both drivable and invisible. His nightly repairs on the perimeter generator become clandestine meetings. The conversations with Hana are short, fraught with tension, whispered fragments of information exchanged over the engine's den. "I need clothes for you," he murmured one night, his head buried in the generator's wiring. "Civilian clothes, something plain, a coat, a scarf." "There was a farmhouse," she whispered back, her eyes scanning the darkness, 2 kilometers east of here, bombed. We passed it when they brought us in. The people left everything. The next day, Frank invents a reason to requisition a jeep to salvage a usable carburetor from a knocked-out vehicle. He drives to the ruined farmhouse. The place is a skeleton, its roof torn open to the sky. Inside, the air is thick with the smell of damp plaster and decay. In a splintered wardrobe, he finds what he needs: a simple wool dress, gray and unassuming, and a heavy, dark coat. They smell of mothballs and fear. He bundles them into a canvas tool bag and hides it under the floorboards of a supply shed near the motor pool. He scrounges K-rations, 2 extra canteens, a first aid kit. He siphons gasoline from a parked deuce-and-a-half, filling 2 jerry cans that he stashes along his planned escape route. His chosen vehicle is a Willys MB Jeep he has been working on himself. He's tuned the engine to a low, steady hum. He knows its every cough and sputter. It's reliable, it's fast, and most importantly, it's anonymous, one of thousands just like it crisscrossing occupied Germany. The final pieces of the plan fall into place. A transport convoy is scheduled to take the prisoners, including the women, to a railhead near Liège in 3 days. They will leave at 0400 hours. The hour before, from 300 to 400, is the graveyard shift, when the guards are at their coldest and most fatigued. The perimeter check is cursory. That is his window. He explains the final details to Hana, his voice barely audible over the now perfectly running generator. The night after tomorrow, at 3:15, there's a loose section of wire behind the supply shed. I'll cut the rest. Be there. Don't bring anything. Just wear the darkest clothes you have. She looks at him, her face a pale oval in the gloom. The fear is there, stark and raw, but beneath it is a sliver of desperate trust. "Where will we go?" she asks, her voice trembling slightly. "West," he says, the single word encompassing a world of hope. "Toward the coast. There are ports, displaced persons camps, chaos. In the chaos, you can disappear, become someone else, a refugee from Belgium, maybe, or France. He doesn't have an endgame, not really. His only goal is to get her out of that wire cage and away from the anonymous brutality of the system." He reaches through the wire, his rough, grease-stained fingers briefly touching hers. Her hand is ice cold. "I'm bringing you with me," he says, repeating the promise that has become his mantra. "Just be ready." She pulls her hand back as the sound of boots crunches on the frozen ground. A new guard is approaching. Frank immediately turns back to the generator, grabbing a rag and wiping down a clean part of the engine casing, his heart hammering against his ribs. The guard passes, grumbling about the cold, and moves on. The moment of danger passes, but it leaves behind a chilling premonition. The plan is set, the pieces are in place, but the entire fragile structure is built over a chasm of discovery and death. The night is as black as pitch, moonless and starless under a thick blanket of cloud. The cold is a physical presence. It seeps into the bones, making every movement stiff and deliberate. It is 0200 hours on February 20th, 1945. For Sergeant Frank Miller, time has slowed to a crawl. Each tick of his government-issue watch a drumbeat marking the approach of the most dangerous moment of his life. He moves through the motor pool like a phantom. He has already done his pre-checks. The Jeep's engine is cold but ready. The canvas bag with the civilian clothes, food, and map is tucked securely behind the passenger seat. He wears his standard fatigues and carries his M1 rifle, looking for all the world like a man heading out on an authorized run. Deception is his only armor. He slips away from the motor pool and circles around the perimeter of the POW camp, staying deep in the tree line. The camp is quiet. The only sounds are the hum of the distant generators and the lonely cry of the wind through the shattered pines. He reaches the supply shed he designated as the meeting point. He crouches in the darkness, his eyes fixed on the section of fence behind the women's tent. He can just make out the dark shape of the tent against the slightly less dark sky. His heart pounds a frantic rhythm against his ribs. Is she there? Does she have the nerve to go through with this? A shadow detaches itself from the deeper shadow of the tent. It moves low and fast, a fleeting shape against the muddy ground. It's her, Hannah. She reaches the fence line and disappears behind the supply shed. Frank lets out a breath he didn't realize he was holding. He moves to meet her. She is trembling, not just from the cold. Her face is a pale smudge in the darkness. She says nothing, her eyes wide with a terrifying mixture of hope and fear. "It's okay," he whispers, his voice rough. "We're going to be okay. The Jeep is ready. We just have to be quiet." He takes a pair of wire cutters from his belt. He has already snipped 2 of the 3 strands of the concertina wire. One more cut is all it will take. He positions the cutters, the steel jaws biting into the cold metal. He squeezes. At that exact moment, a beam of light stabs through the darkness, pinning them against the wall of the shed. It's blindingly bright. Frank freezes, the wire cutters still in his hand. Another beam joins the first, and then another. They are caught. "Drop the cutters, Sergeant." The voice is calm, authoritative, and utterly devoid of emotion. It's not one of the regular camp guards. 2 figures emerge from the darkness behind the lights. They are military police, their helmets gleaming. But it's the third man who steps into the edge of the light that makes Frank's blood run cold. He is an officer, a captain, but his uniform is crisper, cleaner than anyone's this close to the front. On his collar, Frank can just make out the crossed keys insignia of the Counterintelligence Corps. "Sergeant Frank Miller?" the captain asks, though it isn't a question. His eyes flick from Frank to Hannah, who has shrunk back against the shed, her face a mask of pure terror. "My name is Captain Davies. You and I are going to have a conversation. So is the Fraulein." The MPs move in with swift, practiced efficiency. One grabs Frank, expertly twisting his arm behind his back and relieving him of his rifle. The other takes Hannah by the arm. She doesn't resist. She seems to have turned to stone. Frank's mind races, a chaotic jumble of disbelief and despair. How? Who told them? Was it one of the other women? A guard he'd overlooked? "This is a misunderstanding, sir," Frank says, his voice sounding thin and weak. Captain Davies takes a step closer. The beam of his flashlight plays over Frank's face, then the wire cutters on the ground, then Hannah's terrified expression. He doesn't look angry. He looks like an entomologist studying a particularly interesting pair of insects. "I assure you, Sergeant," Davies says, his voice still unnervingly calm, "there is no misunderstanding at all. We know exactly what this is." He turns to the MPs. "Take them separately. I want the sergeant in the command tent. Put her in the locked supply truck. And I want them kept silent." The MPs shove Frank forward, away from Hannah. He glances back, a desperate, helpless look. Her eyes meet his for a fraction of a second across the cold, dark space. There is no hope left in them, only a bottomless, silent accusation. Then she is gone, swallowed by the darkness and the implacable machinery of military justice. Frank is marched toward the command tent, the blinding flashlight beam at his back, each step taking him deeper into a nightmare from which there will be no escape. The inside of the command tent is a stark, brightly lit world of maps, field desks, and the biting smell of kerosene from a portable heater. The warmth does nothing to thaw the ice in Frank Miller's veins. He sits on a folding wooden chair in the center of the tent. Across a small table sits Captain Davies of the CIC. The captain hasn't raised his voice. He hasn't made a single threat. His weapon is a quiet, methodical patience that is more unnerving than any physical intimidation. An MP stands impassively by the tent flap, his presence a silent wall. "Let's start from the beginning, Sergeant," Davies says, opening a file on the desk. "It's thin, but its existence is a damning fact. Tell me about your relationship with prisoner Hannah Vogel." "There is no relationship, sir," Frank says, his voice hoarse. I felt sorry for her." Davies looks up from the file, his eyes clinical. "Pity is a powerful motivator, Sergeant, but it doesn't usually extend to grand theft of a government vehicle, desertion, and aiding the escape of an enemy prisoner of war. That requires something more. What did she promise you?" "She didn't promise me anything." "Information? Names of SS officers in the area? Perhaps she told you she had a wealthy family who would reward you after the war?" Davies's questions are like probes, searching for a logic he can understand. Greed, espionage, blackmail. The simple, messy truth is beyond his operational parameters. "No, sir, it wasn't like that. You see her. She's just a kid. She was scared. The things that happen in these camps." Frank trails off, knowing how hollow it sounds. How can he explain the feeling of responsibility, the instinctive need to protect one small flicker of humanity in a world gone dark? To a man like Davies, it sounds like a confession of weakness, of a mind turned by enemy propaganda. The interrogation grinds on for what feels like hours. Every detail of Frank's service is questioned, every conversation he had near the wire is dissected. Davies has reports from informants, a guard who noted Frank's nightly extended repairs on the generator, another prisoner in Hannah's tent who, in exchange for an extra blanket, reported the whispered conversations. The net had been closing around them for days. Frank's careful plan had never stood a chance. Miles away, in the cold, dark interior of a supply truck, Hannah Vogel faces her own interrogation. A different CIC agent, a lieutenant, questions her in fluent German. The tone is the same: calm, relentless, surgical. "Who is Sergeant Miller working for?" the lieutenant asks. I do not understand," Hannah stammers, her body shivering uncontrollably. "Is he an agent of the Abwehr? A sympathizer? What was your mission?" "Mission? There was no mission. He was kind. He gave me food. He spoke to me like I was a person." Her words are the simple truth, but in the context of total war, they sound like a poorly constructed lie. To her interrogator, kindness is a currency used for manipulation. "Kindness is a tactic, Fräulein," the lieutenant says smoothly. "He wanted something from you. What was it? Information about the Luftwaffe command structure? Radio codes you might have handled?" She can only shake her head, tears of frustration and terror tracing clean paths through the grime on her cheeks. She and Frank are trapped in the same nightmare, their simple human connection twisted by their captors into a sinister conspiracy. They are speaking a language of empathy that the rulebook of war cannot translate. The final verdict comes not with a dramatic confrontation, but with the cold, bureaucratic finality of a signed order. For Sergeant Frank Miller, the charge sheet is long: fraternization with the enemy, dereliction of duty, conspiracy to aid an enemy escape, misappropriation of military property. He will be confined, stripped of his rank, and sent to a disciplinary barracks to await a general court-martial. His war is over, to be finished not on a battlefield, but in a stockade. For Hannah Vogel, the consequences are just as severe. Her file is now flagged in red. She is marked as a high-risk prisoner, a potential intelligence asset or security threat who attempted to compromise an American soldier. She will not be sent to a standard POW camp. Instead, she is rerouted to a high-security interrogation center in Cherbourg, a place for the most dangerous and valuable captives. Her chances of fading into anonymity are gone forever. The last time Frank sees her is at dawn. He is being loaded into the back of a canvas-covered truck, his hands cuffed in front of him. Across the muddy camp, he sees her being escorted by 2 MPs toward a different vehicle. Her head is bowed, her shoulders slumped in defeat. She looks smaller, more fragile than he ever remembered. For a moment, she looks up, and her eyes find his across the compound. There is no anger in her gaze, no accusation. There is only a shared, devastating understanding of their failure. He wants to call out, to say something, anything, but the words die in his throat. The tailgate of his truck slams shut, plunging him into darkness. The engine roars to life, and as the truck lurches forward, carrying him toward his judgment, he is left with nothing but the crushing weight of his broken promise and the haunting memory of her eyes.